the question I hear very often is, what is this? And so I tell them, it's paper. It's paper. Paper, sometimes long strips, sometimes little chips of paper. Some of it is recycled, some of it is purchased. And then it's like doing mosaics, but with paper. So I explain that to them. Sometimes, usually I do work on wood. Almost everything you see here, except for the books, are on wood. The books are old books that nobody wants again. People will say, well, what book did you use? And I say, oh, I don't know. Probably some book someone wrote 20 years ago about golf. So it's not War and Peace. And then for my tools, I'm using big scissors, little scissors. Here are the little scissors. I don't use a paper cutter, I don't use a shredder, and very rarely do I use an X-Acto knife. And then the most important thing, and I think Anthony pointed this out to me once, this is a stylus, and I use the stylus I touch it in a little glue, and then I can pick up a piece with that tacky surface, a tiny piece, and maneuver it into place. And so it's very useful sometimes. Otherwise, I'm using my hands. So I don't use tweezers generally. And Elmer's glue all. Not this glue, but and it's usually good enough for everything. So that's where it begins. But as artists know, and maybe even anybody who just doodled a face, as you're working with these materials, suddenly they become something else. It's like when you're drawing a face and suddenly it has eyes and a nose, and it's looking at you. And it's no longer just ink on paper. It's eliciting a feeling. And so that is something that happens for me in the process of making a piece. And then it starts to become active with me and telling me what it is or what it's becoming. And it's important then for me to go with that and not impose my idea on it, but to see where to dialogue with it. Now, Annie Dillard wrote something wonderful. In fact, my little book, I have the quote that she wrote in her book, Living by Fiction, where she said that art is more like, it's less like a piece of clay that you pummel into your notion of an ashtray, and more like an energetic but ill-trained Labrador retriever dragging you into traffic. And so, usually, when a piece is finished, I look at it and I try to think, what is its character? What is it telling me? And occasionally I ask my husband, who is a writer, and I say, so what do you think? And sometimes I'll be looking at a thing very visually, and he'll say, well, think about it in terms of sound, or think about it in terms of this. And sometimes he gives me a really rude answer, and I don't like that. So anyway, the traffic that it has dragged me into, beyond becoming what it is that it connects me with people. And this has happened to me. I've done art shows now for about 15 years, and people will come into my booth, and it always surprises me when, without words, they somehow see something of the spirit that I put into a piece, and they experience that and they understand it. And I'm going to tell you a story that was most meaningful to me in doing this work. It's not singular, but it is extreme. In 2015, my husband and I went together to Paris about 2 or 3 weeks after the Charlie Hebdo attacks. And in that year, toward the end of the year, was another even worse terrorist attack at the Bataclan. 137 people in 2 different locations, mostly at the Bataclan, where they were listening to music. About 137 people died. And we had been there. We had not been at the Bataclan, but we had gone to see music when we were in Paris in that district, in that area. And so I could imagine that. And it really moved me. And so I made a piece. Now you can see, and maybe it's in the back room, there is a piece with a lot of crosses. Occasionally I do those. The one that's here, I think I was thinking about what's happened to people in Gaza. But not just there. There's wars happening in a lot of places. And so anyway, I made this piece. It was about this big. And it was just a mound of crosses. And it was 137 of them. And I marked, doing like that on a piece of paper every time I did a cross to make sure that I had the right number. So I took that piece to some art shows, and I think it must have been either 2016 or 2017. I was at the Ann Arbor Art Fair in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I came into my booth with a friend, and I was talking to somebody else dealing with another sale, and while she and her friend were just walking around and looking around, and then the other people left. And she was standing close to me, and she looked at a piece on the wall, and she said, I don't usually care much for crosses, but I really like this piece. And so I said to her, oh, I made that because I was very moved by and disturbed by the shootings at the Bataclan. And she said to me, I was at the Bataclan. Everybody, we hid in a closet. Everybody I was with, nobody died. The police got us out. And her friend immediately said, I'm going to buy that piece for you. But I was so touched by the communication that piece had without me saying anything. And this continues to amaze me about art and about abstract art, and I've been a writer in a former life, but art communicates something deep without words. And my daughter, who's very tall over there, she has been watching something that I watched years ago, and it was really formative. I don't know, it really helped to form me as an artist, was the interviews that Bill Moyers did with Joseph Campbell. And she pointed out to me, she said, Joseph Campbell said that the most important things cannot be uttered. The second most important things cannot be adequately communicated with words. And what we talk about is the third most important things. But I feel that maybe art, and not just visual art, but music and art with words, poetry, is a way that we talk about the things that we cannot talk about.